Welcome to the Eternal format, the unofficial format where every set is legal from the original base set to the most recent set, with a ban list to keep things balanced. To learn more about the Eternal format, check the links in the description. Before we get started with today's game, a couple of quick announcements. First, PTCG Sim's replay mode, which is what I've been using to make my videos, has finally been released, and in fact it has been out for almost 2 months. Many thanks to Xiao for developing and maintaining PTCG Sim. Second, I have learned that I got a ruling wrong in my video about Alakazam Star TC Checkmate, and that unfortunately makes the whole deck completely non-functional. I have decided to make that video unlisted, but you can still access it through the Eternal Format Games playlist on this channel. The first deck we're going to be looking at from today's game is Paralyzing Gaze Mill. The core of this deck is Multi-Technical Machine 01, which is a technical machine which gets attached to one of your Pokemon, and that Pokemon can use the attack printed on that card. That attack is Paralyzing Gaze, which costs a single colorless energy, and makes the defending Pokemon paralyzed, without the need for any coin flip or any side effect. The only drawback is that, just like any other technical machine, it gets discarded at the end of your turn. So we need to loop it somehow, and to do so we have Porygon-Z. Porygon-Z has the Dimension Transfer Pokepower, which allows you, once during your turn, to flip a coin. And if heads, you get to take any trainer card, which on Porygon-Z means item card, from your discard pile and put it on top of your deck. A couple of things to note. First, Multi-Technical Machine 1 does not count as a Pokemon Tool card. There is no mention of Pokemon Tools on that card. And since it's not designated as a Pokemon Tool or as a supporter or as a stadium, it does count as an item card. So we can recycle it with Dimension Transfer. And second, there is no hard limit on how many times we can use Dimension Transfer during our turn. So if we have multiple Porygon-Z in play, we get to flip multiple coins, and we really only need one to be heads. Another nice bonus with Porygon-Z is that it evolves from Porygon2. Porygon2 has the backup Pokepower, which allows you to draw cards once during your turn until you have 6 cards in your hand. So a very solid draw engine, even though it's not as good as Claydol. Finally, the Pokemon that we usually attack with is Bunnelby. Bunnelby has the Omega Barrage Ancient Trait, which allows it to attack twice. The first attack we want to use is usually Paralyzing Gaze, and the other attack is usually going to be Bunnelby's first attack, Burrow, which discards the top card of the opponent's deck. The other attack printed on Bunnelby is also solid, Rototiller. It allows you to shuffle any one card from your discard pile into your deck. With these two attacks, Bunnelby is included in several control decks, and this one is absolutely no exception. Next, we're going to be looking at Meditate Barrage, which is a deck that was built and played in this game by Glacial. The main attacker in this deck is Medicham, which also has the Omega Barrage Ancient Trait. Its only damaging attack is Yoga Kick, which costs 2 fighting energy, does 30 damage, and the damage is not affected by weakness or resistance. However, the attack that this deck usually wants to use is not that one, but an attack of Meditate, its pre-evolution. Specifically Meditate. That attack also costs 2 energy, namely 1 fighting and 1 colorless, and it does 10 damage plus 10 more for each damage counter that was already on the defending Pokemon. To allow Medicham to use Meditate, there are 2 Pokemon, namely Shining Celebi and Relicanth. Both of them have an ability that allows your Pokemon to use the attacks of its previous evolutions. Finally, this deck has a lot of options to further increase the damage. They are individually tiny increases, but they really add up, considering that Medicham can attack twice and that Meditate scales with the number of damage counters already on the defending Pokemon, especially after the first attack. So the main ways to increase the attack are the Stadium card Martial Arts Dojo, the Special Energy Strong Energy, Diancie Prison Star, and also Binding Mochi, which we can use the effect of because of the Pokemon power of Scantic G, which poisons both active Pokemon except Pokemon SP if you have a Stadium in play. Moving on now to the game, I started Bunnelby, which is our main attacker, so quite convenient that it's already in the active spot, whereas my opponent started with Baltoy. which will later evolve into Claydol. One funny thing that happened in this game is that I mulliganed 4 times, which is quite a lot, especially if we consider that my deck plays 9 basic Pokemon, so the odds of mulliganing that many times are not that high. Also, my opponent chose to draw 4 cards, 1 for each mulligan I took, which, considering I'm playing a mill deck, maybe is not that bad actually for me. My opponent went first, and on their first turn they found Relicanth right away, which, like I said in the intro, has the ability that allows your evolved Pokemon to use the attacks of the previous evolutions. This deck plays both Relicanth and Shining Celebi, because Relicanth is a fighting type, and so it can use, for example, Focus Sash, and it can also be searched out with Brooklet Hill, in case your opponent puts one in play. Whereas Shining Celebi has 70 HP, and so it can be searched with Buddy-Buddy Poffin. Then my opponent used Artazon to search their deck for Meditate, and put it onto their bench. They attach basic fighting energy to Meditate, and then pass their turn. For my first turn, I first use my opponent's Artazon to grab Fan Rotom. Fan Rotom is a great Pokemon to set up in this deck. I built this deck almost a year ago, when Fan Rotom did not exist, and the only change I made to the deck since was swapping out a Buddy-Buddy Poffin for Fan Rotom. Fan Rotom has an ability that allows you to, once doing your first turn, search your deck for up to 3 colorless Pokemon that have 100 HP or less. And you can use only one Fan Call ability during your turn. Before using Fan Call, I bench my 2 Porygon that I already have in hand, and I also attach a Capture Energy to Bunnelby. Capture Energy allows you to get a basic Pokemon from your deck and put it onto your bench when you attach it. And so with that, I grab Ditto Prism Star. Ditto Prism Star is a super cool card. It has an ability that allows it to evolve into any stage 1 Pokemon. So in this deck, it can act as a 5th Porygon to evolve into Porygon2 and then Porygon-Z. It also has another purpose, which we will get to during this game. Finally, I use Fan Rotom's ability to go get 2 Porygon2 and a second Bunnelby. And I bench the second Bunnelby, keeping the 2 Porygon2 in my hand because it's my first turn, I cannot put them into play right away. And then I attacked twice, using Burrow both times, and so my opponent discarded the top 2 cards of the deck. Onto my opponent's turn, they evolve their Meditate into Medicham, and then they use Luxury Ball to get Claydol. Both of these cards are staples of this format. Luxury Ball is an item card that allows you to get any Pokemon from your deck, excluding Pokemon level X, with the downside that you cannot play it if you already have a Luxury Ball in your discard pile. So virtually all decks run exactly 1 copy of Luxury Ball. Whereas Claydol, which will shortly come into play, is probably the best draw engine there is. Its Pocket Power, Cosmic Power allows you to, once during your turn, put up to 2 cards from your hand to the bottom of your deck in any way you like, and then you draw cards until you have 6 in your hand. They then use Artazon to get their Scantek G into play. And then they bump their own stadium by playing Martial Arts Dojo. Then they play Iono, revealing the one downside of getting evolutions with Fan Rotom, which is that your opponent can just hand disrupt you. And my 2 Porygon2 go right away to the bottom of my deck. And then they attach a Strong Energy to Medicham, play a switch to get Medicham into the active spot. Then they play a Level Ball, which allows them to get a Pokemon with 90 HP or less, namely a Baltoy, which they bench immediately. And then they attack. Specifically, they declared Yoga Kick as their attack, so it's 30 damage. Then we have to add 20 damage because of the effect of Strong Energy, which provides a fighting energy and boosts attacks by 20. And then we also have to add another 10 damage because of the Stadium Martial Arts Dojo, which says the attacks of non-Ultra Beast Pokemon that have any basic fighting energy attached do 10 more damage to the opponent's active Pokemon. And then if the attacking player has more prize cards remaining than their opponent, those attacks do 40 more damage instead, but this last clause obviously will not apply since I'm playing Mill here. So 30 plus 20 plus 10 is 60. Damage is not affected by weakness for this particular attack, so it's doing 60 on the dot, which is exactly the HP of Bunnelby. So my Bunnelby is knocked out, and they take a prize card. Then, because of Omega Barrage, they can attack again. So I promote Fan Rotom, which is able to tank 60 damage without getting knocked out. It's worth noting that because of Relicanth, they could also have used Meditate, which would have actually done more damage to Bunnelby because of weakness, but it would have done way less damage to Fan Rotom because Fan Rotom instead resists fighting. So at this point I start my turn, and with Level Ball I grab a Porygon2, so I can start to get my draw engine going. I then play Buddy-Buddy Poffin, with which I get a Bunnelby. This might have been a small misplay, because in the long run I think having a third Porygon could have been more useful than to Bunnelby. But this might be hindsight bias, so I'm not 100% sure about this. Then I attach Recycle Energy to Bunnelby. Recycle Energy is the only other energy other than Capture that I play in this deck. Of course, I play multiple copies. It provides a colorless energy, and whenever it's discarded from play for any reason, it then returns to my hand instead of going to the discard pile. Then I also attach one Multi-Technical Machine 1 from my hand to Bunnelby, which is now ready to attack, except for the fact that it needs to get to the active spot. To do so, I will need to draw something like a Float Stone, and before I use Porygon2's Poké Power to draw some cards, I thin my hand down a bit further by playing Rescue Stretcher. Rescue Stretcher can put a Pokemon from your discard pile into your hand, or shuffle 3 Pokemon from there into your deck. Right now I only have one Bunnelby in my discard pile, and since I'm trying to thin my hand down, I shuffle it into my deck. And then I use Porygon2's Poké Power to draw 4 cards. I did not find Float Stone directly, but I did find Arven. With Arven, I can get a Pokemon Tool card and an item card, and I decide to grab the Float Stone that I need and a Level Ball. And I play the Level Ball immediately to grab a second Porygon2, with which I will be able to draw a few more cards. And then I play my own Luxury Ball, with which I grab Garbodor, which I then play immediately to evolve Ditto Prism Star. So the second purpose that I mentioned of Ditto Prism Star in this deck is to allow me to play some tech stage 1s. One of them is Garbodor. Garbodor has the Garbotoxin ability, which shuts off all other abilities in play in the player's hand and in the player's discard pile, except for Garbotoxin, as long as Garbodor has a Pokemon Tool attached. My deck does not rely on abilities. Both Porygon2 and Porygon-Z have Poké Powers, which are not abilities. And I also play Heavy Arven to help me find the technical machines, so I will naturally find tool cards, so Garbodor was a sensible inclusion in this deck. The other tech stage 1 that I play, I will show you, is Machoke, whose ability is a stronger bench barrier in a way. It prevents not only all damage done to my bench Pokemon by my opponent's attacks, but also all damage counters placed by their abilities and attacks. I then use my second Porygon2's Poké Power to draw a couple more cards, and I'm lucky enough to also find a Float Stone for my Garbodor. And this is relevant in this matchup because now their Relicanth is pretty much useless, and their Medichams will only be limited to attacking with Yoga Kick. So at this point I retreat my Fan Rotom, and I attack. For my first attack I use Paralyzing Gaze, Paralyzing Medicham. And for my second attack, I use Burrow, discarding the top card of my opponent's deck. Then on my opponent's turn, they bench another Meditate. They use Cosmic Power to draw a few cards. And they only end their turn, so Medicham recovers from the special condition. Passing their turn like that might have also been a misplay, because they maybe should have used the Skuntank-G's Poké Power, since they had a Stadium in play to poison my Bunnelby. This might not end up being a big deal since I had the energy to retreat Bunnelby anyway, but it's something worth noting maybe. In any case, I draw Chaotic Swell, which is the only Stadium I play, it's an interesting stadium, let's put it that way. It says whenever the player plays a stadium card from their hand, discard that stadium card after discarding this one. So I put Chaotic Swell in play, making sure that my opponent needs to work hard if they want to use Scantek G Poké Power again. I also play Team Rocket's Handiwork, which is a staple mill supporter. You flip 2 coins, and then for each heads, you discard 2 cards from the top of the opponent's deck. I flip just 1 heads. I also had another multi-technical machine 1 that I could instantly attach to Bunnelby. And then it's time to draw cards with my Porygon2. With my first one, I find an Ultra Ball, with which small misplay, I should have discarded Gladion instead of versus Seeker, since I'm not gonna get item locked in this matchup. And with Ultra Ball, I find Porygon-Z, which I immediately put it to play. Then I draw 3 more cards with the other Porygon2. And I find Pow Hand Extension, which is a super cool card. It's pretty similar to Counter Catcher, if you're familiar with it. You can only play this card if your opponent has less prizes remaining than you do, which is the case here. And you have 2 options. You can either move 1 energy card attached to their opponent's active Pokemon to one of their bench ones, or you can Gust, just like you can do with Counter Catcher. In this case, I choose to move an energy. Specifically, I move the Strong Energy to their Scantek G. And this actually will result in Strong Energy being discarded, because it says it can only be attached to a fighting Pokemon, and it says if it's attached to anything else, it should be discarded. So that card gets discarded. And then I use Porygon-Z's Poké Power. I flipped heads, so I put a multi-technical machine 1, the one that was discarded at the end of last turn, to the top of my deck, so it's gonna be my top deck the next turn. And then, same thing as last turn, I paralyze my opponent and I discard the top card of their deck. On my opponent's next turn, they have a Stadium, which they play, but it gets immediately discarded because of Chaotic Swell. And then their supporter is Corina, which searches their deck for a fighting Pokemon and an item card. The fighting Pokemon they choose is another Medicham. And the item they choose is a Rescue Carrier, which allows them to recover 2 Pokemon with 90 HP or less from their discard pile into their hand. Then they use Claydol's Poké Power. And just end their turn. On my next turn, I top deck Multi-Technical Machine 1, just like it was inevitable. With Versus Seeker, I get a Team Rocket's Handiwork, with which I flip 2 Tails, unfortunately, as you can see from the lack of cards that were discarded. With Porygon2, I can then draw 2 cards, with which I find another Porygon-Z, which might be necessary to put into play. The first Porygon-Z flip Tails, and I chose not to evolve my second Porygon2 into another Porygon-Z. I felt like during my next turn I would maybe be able to either find a technical machine in other ways, or I was also confident that my opponent would struggle to attack for significant damage, considering Garbotoxin and the fact that they currently had no Stadium in play or even any strong energy. So I paralyzed them, and I mill the top card of their deck. On their turn, they use Claydol's Poké Power, and then end their turn right away. And lucky for me, I draw an Arven, which indeed gets me a multi-technical machine 1. And for my tool, I get Cursed Shovel, which is another mill staple. If the Pokemon that Cursed Shovel is attached to gets knocked out by damage from an opponent's attack, the top 2 cards of the opponent's deck get discarded. And I attach both Multi-Technical Machine 1 and the Cursed Shovel to my active Pokemon. Note, of course, that the Technical Machine is not a Pokemon tool, so it does not take up the Pokemon tool slot. Then I try to use Porygon-Z, flipping Tails, and this time I decide that I really should put the second Porygon-Z in play, even though I will be left with no draw engine in play. And unfortunately, this one also flipped Tails. So I attacked, paralyzing my opponent and milling the top card of the deck. My opponent on their turn used Claydol, found an energy which they decided to attach to their bench Meditate, and then they passed. So, my turn again, I have another Porygon-Z which I cannot put into play, unfortunately. I decide to play Gladion, which is a supporter that allows you to look at your first and prize cards, get one in your hand, and then put Gladion in its place, and then shuffle your prize cards and put them back face down. In particular, my prize cards were an Ultra Ball, a Recycle Energy, a Power Hand Extension, a Level Ball, another Team Rocket's Handiwork, and a Cursed Shovel. And I chose to take the Power Hand Extension, which I then play immediately, because I know I cannot use Paralyzing Gaze this turn. And so I decide to stall in another way by casting Claydol. Then my two Porygon-Z flip tails again, and I attack with Burrow twice, discarding 2 cards from my opponent's deck. My opponent found a Binding Mochi, which they attached to their Medicham, and they played a Rescue Carrier to recover 2 Pokemon that I milled, namely a Claydol and a Medicham. Both of those come into play immediately, and Claydol immediately uses its ability to draw a few cards, its Pocket Power. Then they play Night Stretcher to recover a basic energy. They could have also recovered the Pokemon, assuming they had any. They did not, so... then that energy gets attached to their Medicham with Mochi. And unfortunately for me, the stall doesn't work because they have a Prime Catcher in their hand. Prime Catcher, of course, both Gusts and Switches. And with that, they decide to target Porygon-Z. However, after they gasted Porygon-Z, they realized that they could not finish it off with Meditate's Meditate because of Garbotoxin. Despite that, they had a lot of boosts. Namely, they had Binding Mochi active and the booster from Martial Arts Dojo. So, with their Yoga Kick attack, they do 30, plus 10 from Dojo, plus 40 from Mochi, which means 80. If they had access to Meditate, this would have done 10, plus 40, which is 60, doubled because of weakness. Then they attack again, doing 80 more damage, which results in the knockout of my Porygon-Z. They take a prize card, and I promote Fan Rotom, which has Float Stone attached. They take poison damage, and my turn starts, and I immediately bench a Porygon, which is something I should have done long ago, as I noted. I then play Arven to find another Technical Machine and another Cursed Shovel. The Technical Machine gets attached to my Bunnelby that already has the energy, whereas the Shovel goes on to Porygon-Z. Porygon-Z finally flips heads, so I have a Technical Machine ready for next turn. And then retreat, paralyze, and mill a card. My opponent takes poison damage. And then on their turn, they find strong energy to attach to Medicham. With Versus Seeker, they get Guzma. So again, they get out of the stall. And they choose to take out my basic Porygon. Before they do that, though, it's time to use their Claydols to draw a few cards. They attack doing 60 on the dot to my Porygon. And then I promote Garbodor, which can and will tank a hit without getting knocked out. At the start of my turn, I discard the Multi-Technical Machine, which I should have discarded on the previous turn. Then I attach the one I just drew. And amazingly, Porygon-Z flips heads again. I then retreat and attack, paralyzing and milling. Again, slight misplay on my part, because Capture Energy here could have grabbed a Porygon to put into play. And also, I maybe could have attached it to the active Bunnelby, because while its attacks cost 1 energy, it has a retreat cost of 2, and I may have to retreat in the future to avoid the poison damage. But anyway, Technical Machine gets discarded, my opponent gets out of the stall with Switch. Then they poison both active Pokemon with Scanter G. draw a few cards with Claydol. And then they attack, doing 80 damage to my active Bunnelby. Cursed Shovel then triggers, milling 2 cards. Recycle energy comes back to my hand, and Bunnelby gets discarded. Then I promote Fan Rotom, sacrificing it, basically. And so Fan Rotom got knocked out, and my opponent is now down to just 1 prize card. So it is now my turn. I attach Capture Energy to my benched Bunnelby, so it's a good thing, I guess, I did not attach it to my active last turn. Getting a Porygon, which I should have gotten last turn, so now my Porygon2 would have been in play. I have a Technical Machine to attach to Bunnelby. My Porygon-Z again flips heads. I bench another Bunnelby from my hand just to have one to retreat into to get away from poison, just in case. Then I retreat into Bunnelby, paralyze, and mill a card. My opponent takes poison damage. They play a Corrina, but choose not to grab anything, so just shuffling the deck afterwards. With the Skuntank G, they poison my Bunnelby, and they pass. So both active Pokemon take poison damage. Of course, their active Pokemon is no longer paralyzed, despite the fact that it's still shown rotated. I do attach the Recycle Energy to Bunnelby just for the eventual retreat. I then put a Porygon2 into play to draw a few more cards. And I find another mill supporter, which is Misfortune Sisters. It allows me to look at the top 5 cards of my opponent's deck and discard all items I find, which are quite a lot, so lucky for me, my opponent now only has 4 cards in their deck. With Porygon-Z, I flip heads yet again, even though this time it was not really needed, as it will turn out. Then with Bunnelby, I paralyze, which, yeah, and I discard 1 card from the top of my opponent's deck. My opponent takes poison damage, and so do I. My opponent just drew and passed. And then I was just able to attack twice with Burrow, getting my opponent's deck to 0 and winning my deck out. So, Paralyzing Gaze Mill ended up winning this very close game. It definitely benefited from Fan Rotom in the early game. I'm very satisfied with that card existing. One very big downside that this deck has is its matchup into other controlling matchups, or other milling matchups, indeed, because it's not as fast to mill as other decks. It often chooses to go slower in order to paralyze. I remember when I played this deck before Fan Rotom existed, in a tournament I got matched up against Piano Leg Pit, who was playing Turbo like Jolteon. That match ended in a tie, because he was milling my cards and I was putting them back with the Rototiller, so it was a bit of a stally situation. Eventually, if the time limit did not exist, he would have won that match, but he won that tournament, so I guess he was happy. One thing I maybe should have done in that game was to attack with Porygon2, which would have done 30 damage, which would have been negated by Light Pulse, but it would have also put Light Jolteon to sleep, and it would have burned it. So maybe that was a path to victory by taking prize cards, which is not something you usually do with this deck. Another interesting card in this deck that I did not get to play in this game was the Ice-Spec Dowsing Machine, which is a popular Ice-Spec in controlling decks. It allows you to discard 2 cards from your hand in order to get any trainer card from your discard pile back into your hand. So that is yet another way that we can recycle technical machines, but it also can recycle other interesting trainers like Pow Hand Extension or Chaotic Swell. So, with that being said, thanks for watching. If you have any comments or questions about the game or the lists, feel free to comment below. Thanks again to Glacial for playing this game, and I'll see you next time.